Hey everybody, it's Tim Hinton, the Beast of the Marching Arts. Welcome to the Marching Roundtable podcast. I'm sitting here with Dr. Mary White. Mary, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm so glad you're here. I'm sitting next to me.
I am at Mary's house down here in Stuart, Florida. Thanks for having me and my husband here for a few days.
It's been my pleasure.
So we're here to talk about, there's a new version of my book. Way back, Mary, in 2005, I wrote this book. Everybody, if you're watching the video version, by the way, you can see Mary and I at her poolside with the book. So I called it Marching Band, a Field Guide, but it's actually just a bunch of practical information. I called it Practical Suggestions on Show Construction, Rehearsal Techniques, and Fixing Show Problems. So there's a new edition that's an online version that you can just purchase it, and anytime you can access it online rather than having the hard copy of the book. I've just redone it. So things have changed a little bit since 2005 in the world of marching band, so I decided it was time to update the book.
Oh, that's awesome.
So let's talk about where the book came from. This original one, this was back in the early 2000s. It's actually, the reason I wrote the book, Mary, is the same reason that we started the podcast. We started the podcast back in 2011, but if you remember, the way I always describe this, everybody, is that we were sitting around, a bunch of us were talking about Drum Corps 2010, grousing about some things, and we were like, okay, rather than just sitting around complaining about things we don't like about the marching activity, let's try to do something better. But the other thing I always tell people about why we started the podcast, and actually why I wrote this book, is that here's the thing. You know how you see a group performing, whether it's a marching band, a drum corps, an indoor a drum line, a color guard, winter guard, whatever, and I would often think, oh man, if that director and those students just knew like a couple things. Yeah, maybe one thing, maybe just a couple things. Right. So the idea back in early 2000s when I was writing the book was, let me just put some of those basic practical things down. They're not like earth-shattering. Most people that read the book are like, oh yeah, I knew that. But I feel like it's hopefully good for them to be reminded.
And the reminder of it as well, it could serve as a checklist, for ensuring that those things are happening. I love the reminder, Tim.
So the idea was, okay, let's help directors be reminded of the basic things that are really practical things. And here's another reason I decided to write this book. I do a lot of consulting. I'll go to a marching band rehearsal, and sometimes they're playing one of my shows or some of my music, or sometimes not, and I'm just there to make suggestions, help try to make the show better. Well, I went to a rehearsal one time with a band in the state of Georgia, I'll say that much, and they were having the rehearsal, and they were like, okay, stop for a water break. Okay, so at a lot of bands that are really running on all cylinders and everything, that can take what? A minute, 2 minutes, whatever. 3 minutes, 5 minutes? It doesn't matter. This break, I'm not making this up, Mary. This water break lasted 45 minutes.
No, I believe you. I've seen it, Tim.
You know what they did, everybody? There was one cooler with the water, and everybody got a little Dixie cup. They handed them, and the whole band got in one line, holding Dixie cups, and one at a time they went to the cooler. And literally, and I was sort of freaking out the whole time when I'm looking at the director. I'm like, wow, this is a kind of inefficient use of time, whatever. And he's like, oh no, it's fine. It's like a break. So literally, out of like a 3-hour rehearsal, 45 minutes, maybe 2.5-hour rehearsal. So anyway, so I thought,
not to mention that's probably one water break in a 3-hour rehearsal is probably not enough. But
right. So I don't remember if they did it a second time. I think I've sort of blocked that out by now. But it was intense, and I thought, okay, this is like a basic thing. So in the book, for example, there was a thing about how to do an efficient water break. I mean, I've been to schools before where everybody's required to have their own individual cooler, their own little like thermos.
Most drum corps do it that way.
Absolutely.
Now.
You have your name on it. Nobody else is going to drink out of it because that way it's safer. And it can literally take like 2 minutes, 1 minute. Everybody goes to their cooler. They drink their own little drink out of their thermos. They go back on the field. You're ready to go.
Gush and go.
Okay, so this is like, most of you listening to this right now are like, well, duh, of course I know how water break. But my point was, I was at a school one time where the director didn't know this basic thing and was losing a whole lot of rehearsal time. So I thought, let me put down these practical suggestions on how to run a rehearsal, how to put a show together, how to make a show better, just basic practical stuff.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I mean, sometimes I feel like we have these habits that we do them all the time. We don't even realize maybe that they're eating away at rehearsal time, or not good pedagogical structures in your rehearsal time, or things like that. I mean, you could read the book.
Yeah, and there's a video conversation I have on the website at Marching Arts Education with the wonderful Matt Harloff and Michael Klesch from Carolina
masters,
Crown.
Masters.
And they talk about how meticulous they are. I mean, they literally have, each student has to put their pencil a certain way on the music stand, standing in front of them as they're having rehearsal.
Right.
But all of those sort of practices, those procedures, make everything run more smoothly. And I have to tell you, students like it.
Oh, so everyone loves structure, and kids especially love structure. It's all about safety. Kids feel safe when they know what's going to happen. If you know every time you're putting your flag down the same way, it's safe. It's definitely a safe environment, for sure.
And of course, it creates efficiency and makes things run better in all the rehearsals. And we know exactly how we're going to lay our horns down when we take a break or when we're doing something. And the same thing when you go to a performance. They know the procedure, what we're going to do before we get on the field, after we leave. All those things really matter. But a lot of times, directors haven't been taught this. Nobody's ever sat down and explained to them, here's the most efficient way to have a water break.
Sure.
So I was like, let me jot these down. So again, if you're watching the video version with Mary and I at her house, and it's just started to rain, it's nice. We're out by her pool, everybody, and we were going to try to be in the pool, but that didn't happen because it's raining. But anyway, I decided to write these things down. Let me tell you another example of something in the book that I think is hopefully really helpful. I have like the 5 easy fixes, is the way I sort of say it in the book. 5 things that I'm like, okay, do these things, and this will help your show be better. One of them that I really love is the fastest moving thing on the field. Have you and I talked about this?
All the time. We've talked about it all the time, but I say it all the time when I judge, all the time.
And I think this is a concept that's, to me, so basic, but people don't realize it. And so I was like, every director needs to understand this. Every staff member needs to understand this. The theory, everybody, is that your eye automatically goes to the fastest moving thing on the field, right? So sometimes that's a guard performer who's doing a solo, who's dancing across the field and doing, or it's going to be you want the trumpets to be featured, so you have them go a little faster than everyone else. There's all kinds of devices we use when we're staging a show to try to make you notice something, right? It can be a sudden volume, it can be a sudden new color, it can be contrary motion. But the most basic one, in my opinion, is the fastest moving thing on the field. I have to tell you, sometimes I'm watching a show, we're sitting in the stands, we're at a contest, we're watching the show.
I know what you're going to say.
Well, sometimes it's a drum major running from the back of the field.
Yes.
And I tell you, I don't care how exciting or interesting the show is. I don't care how good the band is, how well they're playing, how beautiful the guard is. If there's someone from the back of the field, a drum major, who's running as fast as they can to get to the front of the field and go up on their little tower or their ladder, I watch the whole thing. I watch them the whole time.
Me too, because I want them to have a successful, get on the podium successfully.
Right, but it draws your eye. The point is, it draws your eye, everybody. The fastest moving thing on the field. So this is a great device for thinking of your show from moment to moment and making sure that the fastest moving thing on the field is where you want me to look. It's one of the devices.
IPS, I thought you were going to say a band parent moving flags.
Well, that could be it too.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it's someone putting flags down.
Yeah.
Or picking up flags. I mean, we don't do a lot of that, thank goodness, anymore. And shows, a lot of times, they're all preset. But, I mean, I tell you, I sat at a drum corps show back in the early 80s, and I was mesmerized by someone laying flags down. They had a big stack of them. This was back in the day, everybody. They had a big stack of them. Back in the way back. Okay. I guess so. But anyway, they were putting them down, and that's what I watched for like a minute and a half. And I realized it later. I'm like, oh my God, I've been watching this girl put flags down. I don't know there was probably a soloist. It was probably wonderful things happening. And I think a lot of times we just think, that's not interesting. Nobody's going to notice that. Nobody's going to watch that. But if it's the fastest moving thing on the field, I'm in. I'm watching it. Sometimes it's also, there's lots of other devices, like maybe the one thing that's not moving can also draw your eye. If everyone's moving but there's somebody stationary, so there's lots of devices. They are listed in the book. Okay.
Fascinating.
So the thing I just looked this up a minute ago. I did not realize that I wrote this first version in 2005. So it's been almost 20 years.
Yeah, but it's still so practical. I find the information. Now, I haven't read it in a while, Tim. By the way, I have a special inscribed edition.
You do. You have a special signed copy, of course.
Yeah, and I find it very practical and really purposeful. The fact that it's moved to digital says it's still relevant. Don't you think so?
Yeah, and I just hope it makes it easier for people.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's nice to have I love a book when I can hold a book in my hand, but the thing I can do now is I can update it any day.
Right.
Because the version is always going to be there online, and if you buy the copy and then you go there, you'll get the latest version. And if I go in and add something or change something, you won't know, because you're going to pull the book up and there's the new thing. So
Right.
I'm planning to continue to add
That's
to
a really
it.
great idea, because then it becomes a dynamic document, something that you could refer back to time after time after time as things change.
So let me ask you this, Mary. Has anything happened in the world of marching since 2005? Has there been any changes?
No, Tim.
That was hilarious.
A
Like,
lifetime, a world
yeah,
of
I
changes.
mean, we're wearing
really.
different things. Where
Yeah.
there's electronic amplification. There's
Props.
tons and tons of things have changed since then.
Yes.
So it was very interesting to say, okay, I'm going to do a second edition. To go back in, and I literally went to the text of the original book
Right.
and just started. Oh, okay. Well, this part I'm talking about, what your uniform looks like. And then I was like, okay, well, I have to update this. I need to make this more current. So my goal is to keep the
Talk
book
about
updated.
costuming instead of uniforms,
And then there's
maybe.
amplification, and then drill and staging is different now, and props and set pieces are different now. So it was time for update.
And I love that it was so thoughtfully done. Like, you didn't just say, I'm just making a digital copy of the same book. You went
True.
through and had a whole re-edition of it.
Well,
if
it
you
needed
will.
to happen. I mean,
Yeah.
it's been 20 years, so much has happened and changed, and I wanted it to be as current and as helpful as possible. But I will say, like, the basic concepts of how to have an efficient water break, or how to get my focus on the right thing on the field when you're
Sure.
designing a show, how to run an efficient rehearsal. Those basics really are the same. I did updates to every single chapter, and every single
That's
paragraph
wonderful.
has something new that needed to be, made more current. But I feel like the basic information, the concept, the idea of why the book exists, right? You need basic practical information. And I feel like I've had directors tell me, I knew most of this. It was good to be reminded. And then I did have a couple ideas that helped me that I can now put into place. That's what I'm sort of hoping for people.
I love that, Tim. And it also kind of serves as a textbook of sorts, doesn't it?
It can be, but I wasn't trying to create a comprehensive textbook. There are wonderful textbooks, like, I helped Wayne Markworth distribute his wonderful dynamic
And
marching
that's
band.
wonderful.
And that's way more comprehensive than this. This is something that you can sort of read through in an afternoon or whatever and keep referring to. But I felt like I wanted to remind people of these basic practical concepts, how to run a rehearsal, how to make decisions. And of course, if I'm getting ready for my first big marching contest, there's information in the book about, here's the things to focus on that last rehearsal
Right.
before you go. That's really important to know that. Those kinds of basic practical things.
Yeah, I love the practicality of it. I mean,
Thank you.
practical often works,
Well, that was the concept behind the book. The working title the whole time I was working on it was Practical Suggestions for Marching Band. I ended up with this fancier title, Marching Band, A Field Guide, because, playing off the field
Yeah.
part of it. And by the way, there's wonderful illustrations all throughout it by my dear friend Lee Vandergriff, and his art is all throughout the book, and it is still attached to the book on the digital
and
copy.
still relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. They're very interesting, sort of fun hand drawings, art pieces about marching band. But that's all still there. So thank you, Lee, for letting me for doing this art for the book. Anyway, I just wanted to let people know there's a new version. If you go to timhinton.com or even marchingartseducation.com, there's links there where you can find the book. You can buy your own copy. I'm excited about having the new version available.
And I'm excited it is available.
And listen, everybody, it's just practical suggestions to help you do better. Hopefully, if you get the book and you find just a couple things and you no longer have a 45-minute water break, then your life is going to be so much better.
Tim, where can they locate the book?
Yeah,
I mean,
timhinton.com is the easiest way to do it. Or if you go to marchingartseducation.com, where all of the webinars and Marching Roundtable and all is, all of that. And then there's a link where this podcast is located as well. But if you just go to timhinton.com or beastofthemarchingarts.com, they both go to my stuff.
good
Thanks
stuff.
for talking to me, Mary.
Tim, I'm so happy you're here.
Yeah, we've had a great time, everybody visiting, catching up. We've had some great meals. We've worked on some show stuff together because Mary and I have been we've been doing shows together, creating shows and
We don't need
designing
to say
shows
how
together
long.
for a long time. Well, really long. Well, since the 90s?
Yeah, 90s.
Yes. We were just tiny
Pups.
little things.
Kindergarten, color guard, we called it that.
Practically. Thanks for talking to me.
You got it.